So for the last 3 months, I've been trying a business model known as Amazon KDP. I first became aware of it maybe 4 or 5 years ago and basically just ignored it, but I've recently seen a big uptick in the number of people talking about it, posting pictures about massive profits, seeing businesses being sold around it. So I thought I'd give it a quick try and see if anything has changed, see what it's like as a business model, and I thought I'd share the results with you here on this channel. So if you're new here, my name is Chaz, and I'm on a journey to build a £1 million investment portfolio. And I'm sharing all the things that I'm trying, doing, failing at, succeeding at on this channel so you can follow along and just see my progress. And hopefully that means it can shortcut anything for you if you're trying a similar kind of challenge, or maybe you'll just find it nice and entertaining to watch. If this is the kind of content that you think you'd enjoy, then please hit the subscribe button and the like buttons. It helps push this video out to more people that might also enjoy that content. So let's jump in. So before we get too far, I just want to outline what the Amazon KDP business model is. So the KDP in Amazon KDP stands for Kindle Direct Publishing. So you may be aware that the process for getting a book published normally is you'll write a manuscript, it'll get sent off to publishers, they'll review it, they might ask for changes, they might just flat out reject it. But eventually, say you get picked up by a publisher, they'll distribute your book, they'll advertise your book for you and do a lot of that legwork for you, but you will have done the core writing kind of author main bit of the process. Amazon KDP is slightly different in that you as the author, you still do all the writing, etc., but the distribution is handled by Amazon, so that's the bit that would normally be handled by the traditional publisher. So when someone orders your book, Amazon will print a copy of your book and send it to the customer. But Amazon doesn't do some of the other bits that a traditional publisher would do, such as the marketing and advertising, etc. But you do get access to Amazon's platform to sell your book on, which in itself could be a slight make-up for the shortfalling of KDP. So this means that small independent authors can publish books, and it's really aimed at novels and sort of longer books and stories than it is at what we're going to be using it for in this example. Now there are some really good benefits of this in that if you're a successful author, if you start selling a lot of books, you could potentially make a lot more than you could make with a traditional publishing contract. And that's because the book sales directly relate to the amount of money that you get. So every time you sell a book, you'll get a slice of the revenue. Now I just want to outline a couple of categories of book just before we go any further, because the business model that gets talked about online, especially here on YouTube and a few other different places, is focusing on really the lower end content of books. So I categorize them broadly as follows. So I'd say high content books, generally books sort of 50,000 words and plus. So these are going to be your full novels and things like that. And you know, those books can span into hundreds of thousands of words, but that's just where I put the cutoff just for me. Then you've got the medium content books. So I put this as books more than about 5,000 words. So again, these are sort of shorter books, maybe more informational type books or short stories. Then we've got low content books, so books below 5,000 words, and they don't generally have to be words either. They could be pictures, they could be like word searches, things like that. Just keep sort of a broad mind when you think about these book categories. And then finally, there's no content books. So no content books are books where it's literally just a cover and it might have blank pages inside, or it might just have lines across the pages. The idea being that you can sketch in them, you could write notes in them, you could journal in them, you could write recipes down. So you can see that they do have some value in their own way as well. Now the business model that I've seen touted online generally focuses around on those no and low content books. So the idea being is that you would throw loads of books out there in underserved areas, and these books are generally quite quick to make because you're not having to write 100,000 words of a story. You might not be particularly good at writing. It's more of a graphic design type process than anything else. And the idea is then, because you can produce quite a lot of these books quickly, you can put a lot out there on Amazon, and the idea is that the cumulative sales that those books might get would earn you a decent amount of money. So I thought I'd put that to the test, and that's the route that I've gone down. Now I will just say before we get too far into this, that there are quite a few people peddling what I think is a very unhelpful version of this business model. So in of itself, I don't see a problem with the model. But what a lot of people are suggesting that people who want to try this out do is just throw literally hundreds of books out on Amazon. So just generate books as quickly as they can. And to be honest, if you're doing that, you're not really going to be adding any value with the books that you produce. If you're literally just producing a cover with blank pages inside, yes, there is a market for those kind of books. But if thousands of people do the same thing as you, the market will be absolutely flooded. So really, I was looking to add some value to the books that I'm producing with something unique, a twist. So for example, this isn't what I produced, but this is just an off-the-fly example. Say it was a recipe book. So instead of having just a blank book with loads of lines, I might have some useful things in there, such as conversions between cups and grams. I might have some useful list of cupboard items that are good to keep, or maybe just a few static recipes in there, while most of the pages are blank that could be filled in. But a few sort of pictures and things like that might help. So that could be a way of adding value, because maybe if you're in the UK and you're looking at a US recipe online, it might all be in cups or different measurements than we use here. And so just having that book to hand could be quite handy. So what I ended up making is I ended up making 3 of the sort of low to no content type books. So these were more journal-y type books where there was a lot of sort of lines, blank spaces, but they were done in a design fashion with lots of boxes, images, all that kind of stuff. And they had value-added items to them as well, so nice lists of useful information and bits and pieces like that scattered throughout the book. So it wasn't just a copy-paste, every page is the same type book. I then had one book that was a medium content book, so I wrote about 8,000 words and put that down in a book. I think the book ended up being about 40 or 50 pages long, and it was a non-fiction type book, so it's based on facts and things like that, rather than a fictional story. Now, the biggest question that I think most people have when they start this out is, how on earth do you know what to write the books about? What's going to sell well? And to be honest, I think it comes down to the usual kind of business things, in that you want something with high demand and low competition. Now, you don't want no competition and no demand, because that just shows there's no market for that, and vice versa. You don't want something that's really in demand with loads of competition, because it's unlikely that you're going to be able to make a product that stands out and compete against the established players in the market. So I think really doing your research is the key part of this business model. And I think I've got a reasonably good method of doing it. I've seen a few people doing something similar, but no one seems to be doing exactly the same as what I've been doing. So I just want to share that with you here. And again, it may not be the best method, but it seems to be an okay method from what I can tell. I can't really see any flaws in it. So with those 2 things, I broke them down. First, I'm looking for areas where there's a lot of demand, and then secondly, I'll be looking for areas with low competition. Now, the areas with lots of demand is actually really easy to work out on Amazon. So it's obviously really difficult in real life. You need to do lots of market surveys and things like that. But Amazon, in the book section, has what's known as a bestseller rank. So in the same way you might have music charts where there might be a certain number of songs in the top 40 or something like that, Amazon ranks every book on its website, and the rank updates every couple of hours, and it shows you what the number 1 selling book is, or what the number 1 millionth best-selling book is on Amazon. And trust me, there's millions of books on Amazon. But what's better is this data is published on every single page of every single book. So if you scroll down on a page, you'll get down about halfway down the page, and you'll see there's a bestseller rank. And you can take this bestseller rank and you can plug it into online calculators to get a rough idea of what's selling and what's not selling. So for example, I found the number 1 best-selling book on Amazon, and I plugged in number 1 onto a bestseller rank calculator, and I can see that that book is probably selling upwards of 5,000 copies a day. Now, this number doesn't have to be exact, it's just to give you an idea of where you're going. We don't really care what the actual number is, we're just looking for something that actually gets sales, that gets a reasonable amount of traction. Now we can make a bit of a guesstimate that if that book has, say, a £2 profit margin on every copy, that book might be making £10,000 in profit every single day from being the number 1 bestseller. So you can see there's a massive potential market here if you could get a decent selling book. So the first thing I would do is I fired up a little spreadsheet and I started just basically searching for random things on Amazon. I'd go into different subcategories of books, and I'd be trying to find areas where the bestseller ranks on the first page were generally on average below 150 to 200,000. That was just my cutoff period. You might have something different. But generally, when I was plugging those kind of numbers into the calculators, books will be selling on average about 1 a day if you can get to that kind of rank. So that seemed like a good sort of target to aim for, because that would bring in some decent revenue per book. Now, it would obviously take forever to go into every single book on every single page that you're searching for to find the bestseller rank. And fortunately, there are loads of Chrome extensions you can get out there, which will literally just show you the bestseller rank on the search results page. So I found that really helpful. I'm not going to promote a particular Chrome extension here, but you can go and find them online yourself. There's loads of different ones to choose from, and they all basically do the same thing, so there's not much difference between them. So what I'd do is I'd search for something on Amazon, and I'd just skim through the first page, looking at all the relevant books on the page. So just bear in mind, you might get some books that aren't related to your search term, but I was specifically only looking at the ones related to the search term. And I was just kind of getting a rough idea of what the average bestseller rank is. And again, I'd then note down the search term that I put in and the bestseller rank onto a spreadsheet. And I did that for maybe 30 or 40 different search terms. What I actually did as well, again, this is just my preference, but I was actually searching all within one particular niche. And the idea being is that if I had something successful and found maybe a niche that was particularly good, I'd quite like to build a brand around it, with the idea being that there's potentially an exit that I could do further down the line if I had a particular brand. And a brand is going to be worth more than if you had a scattergun account with loads of different books in loads of different categories, because you can really build some authority in that niche. So the second area was to work out what the competition is. And this is really the bit that's a bit harder and a bit slower. So my gut instinct here was to do the same thing that I did when I built websites. So you can see that video. I'll leave a link to it down below, or I'll put a card coming up on the screen wherever they appear now. And what I did for that is I just had a Google Sheet, and I could put in a search term. The sheet would then build me a URL to a Google search, and it would then scrape the number of results for that search return. And that would give me an idea of the competition that I'm facing for that particular search return. So I was going to do that for Amazon, but I very quickly realized that you can't really do that for Amazon, because with Google you can put in a lot of expressions to narrow down your search results. So you can put in a minus to exclude certain things. You can search for file types, you can search within dates, you can make sure that exact phrases are in the search results, etc. But you can't do that as much with Amazon. So if I just typed in cookbook, you'll see that there's 60,000 results that came up. Now, cookbooks maybe not the best example for this, because there will be a lot of results for cookbooks, but I doubt that there's actually 60,000 cookbooks on Amazon. There might be 5,000 cookbooks, maybe 10,000 cookbooks on Amazon, but some of those results, as you would get into, I don't know, page 50, page 60 on Amazon, are going to be less and less relevant to the actual search result that you're putting in. And what you'll very quickly find is that when you start searching on Amazon for the more niche down things, which is where we're looking to target, you soon find out that actually by the time you get to page 2, quite a lot of the results might be starting to be not that relevant anymore, or sometimes even there might only be a handful on page 1 that are particularly relevant if you're in a very narrow specific niche. And so that's really what we want to find. So I was taking the search terms I found with decent returns, and I was searching to find what page the product started to drop off in relevance. And this is just a manual search. I just have to put it in, and I just go through the pages until I found the page where maybe about half the results weren't really relevant anymore, because that's about when I decided that the results were no longer relevant. So I then had that compiled into a spreadsheet with search terms, the average bestseller rank on the first page, and the number of pages before things dropped off. So I then filtered that down to products where really everything was dropping off in the first 2 pages, because that suggested to me that there was good demand, because I'm looking at good bestseller ranks, but also lower competition, because there's really only maybe 20 pieces of competition out there. So there's a good chance I might be able to get a product onto the first page of search results. And that's really where we're going to make some decent money. So by this point, I'd worked out a selection of books within a particular genre that I wanted to target. So now it was time to make the books. Now, I actually found this bit pretty straightforward. Amazon give you a lot of data about how you should make the books, how you shouldn't make the books, the differences between bleed and no bleed pages. You can even download exact templates to the sizes if you plug in the number of pages that you want and the actual finished size that you want on the book. All those tools are available on the Amazon website, and I actually found that all pretty straightforward to use, so that's all fine. The hardest bit is designing the cover then if you're making these lower content books. So the cover is really important, because when you search for something, it's the cover of a book that you see. That's the first thing that's going to draw you in. Now, I'm no graphic design expert, but I was being a bit of a cheapskate on this project, so I decided not to pay anyone to make the covers for these books, and I made them myself. Now, they're not the top quality, but they're a lot better than a lot of the covers that you see made on Amazon that are clearly made by just someone on like PowerPoint or something like that, or with really basic kind of editing skills on Photoshop. And to be honest, if you're not great at making covers, then you definitely need to pay for someone to make the covers for you, because a really shoddy cover is just going to destroy your book's chances straight off the bat. When you do your research, you'll very quickly start to come across a lot of these books where it's maybe just like a stock image on the foreground with some text over the top or something like that. There's no sort of editing, there's no flair, there's nothing to grab your attention when you look at those covers. So quite a good way to design the covers that I found was I would screenshot every book that was on the first page of the search results that I was looking for. And I'd be looking for what kind of design elements are on those books, because if they've risen to the top of the rankings, then presumably that's the kind of style that people are after. And so I basically just copied those styles. So if there was, for example, lots of flowers on the cover, there'd be lots of flowers on my cover as well. If there were dinosaurs on the front cover, there'd be dinosaurs on my book's front cover, and so on and so forth. And by doing all the covers myself, because all my books were in the same kind of overarching potential brand, it meant that I could use the same colours, the same fonts, etc. to really make sure that there was a brand message through all my covers. Now, again, that may or may not have been overthinking what I was doing, but I think it's certainly a good way if you are potentially looking to take this to the next level and build a brand. It's something that you should be really paying attention to. Because if you do want to exit and sell the business in years' time, it just makes the whole thing look far more professional and I think will attract far more buyers. Now, I said at the beginning, Amazon KDP is different from traditional publishing in that the marketing in traditional publishing is done for you, because as the author, your skills are going to be in the writing and producing rather than in the marketing and promoting your book. So usually publishers will have a dedicated team that will do that for you. Now, if you're self-publishing, that comes into your camp and is required by you. Now, the benefit with Amazon KDP is that you're using the Amazon platform, so immediately you have access to loads of potential customers, but you need to make your product stand out and get your product in front of those customers. Now, I think there's quite a lot of bad information floating around about this. Now, it's something that I can't prove or disprove just because of the way Amazon works, but a lot of people online are saying that you need your book to have a good bestseller rank to hit the first page, and I think that's just completely backwards. If your book is being promoted by Amazon as a good product match for the search description, then it's much more likely to be bought because Amazon's going to be putting it higher up in the search rankings. So think about it from Amazon's perspective. Amazon want to make as much money as possible, and that means they want to promote products that people are going to buy in the search results. So what we're looking to do is not get a book that has the highest bestseller rank. We're looking to make the best product because that will get the bestseller rank over time. But the hard thing here is that Amazon has no idea what your book's about when you publish your book. When you publish your book, you put in a few key phrases, a few search terms. When you're publishing the book, it will have the search title for your book. And I'm sure Amazon has some kind of like AI system where maybe it reads your book to look for maybe recurring words or things like that in your book, just so it gets a flavour for what actually your book is about and who might like your book. So what I decided to do is, and I've seen this idea bounded around by a few different people in the Amazon KDP space, and I think it's quite a good idea, is to spend some money on advertising at the beginning just to get some sales, because then Amazon knows roughly who wants to buy your book and what search terms people are buying your book from. So this is really where I needed to spend a bit of money. So everything that I'd been doing to this point was free, and now it was time to dive in with some advertising. So I use the Amazon ads platform, and I use just the basic, what they call auto ads. So Amazon picks what it's going to target for the search terms in your book, for your book, and you can plug in how much you want to pay per click and things like this. Now, what you can see from this dashboard here is that on that purple line, which is the cost per click, I was generally trying to force that down. So it started off at fairly high numbers, and what I was doing was sort of once a week I was going into Amazon's dashboard and I was reducing the amount of money I was happy to pay for a click for that particular search term. And that meant that my advertising costs started to decrease as time went on, but I was still getting the same number of people clicking on my product, and I was generally seeing a sale between sort of every 10 to 15 clicks. So that means you can immediately start to work out where your break-even points are. So if I'm making about £2 profit per book, then I need to be getting clicks for maybe sort of 15 to 20 pence to be breaking even. Anything more than that, and I'm making a loss on each sale. Anything and any lower that I can drive that, I'm much more likely to be making a profit on the advertising sales. Now, actually turning a profit on these sales wasn't my main intention for this advertising campaign. It was more about just getting some sales. The idea being that I would then show Amazon who likes the books and for what search terms they're searching for to find the books and buy the books. So that was my advertising strategy, and I ran that for about 6 weeks on both the UK and the US. Now, I will just say I had much better success with UK advertising than US advertising, and I think this might just be because the US market is so much more saturated than the UK markets. There are far more products out there, but there's also more people buying the products. But I found I was really struggling to get the cost per click much lower on the US markets, whereas I could get it quite easily below 20 pence on the UK advertising spend. The second key element of my marketing strategy was reviews. Now, I don't know about you, but I pretty much just don't buy stuff on Amazon if it's got 0 reviews, because I'm a bit like, oh, will I actually get what I'm expecting? All this kind of stuff. I like to read a lot of the reviews, especially if there's videos of people showing the product, so I can get a real feel for it. Because that's the difference between online shopping and shopping in a real shop, is you can't hold the product and see the product, you just get the glossy photos on the Amazon page, whereas I want to see the actual product itself. Now this is again obviously a bit of a bottleneck because I need some sales to get some reviews, but I think I need some reviews to get some sales, and so on. So I actually ended up using a service called Pubby. Now that's Pubby. So in Amazon's terms of service, it's actually against their terms of service to do sort of book swaps and things like this, or incentivize reviews. So you have to find different methods to get reviews. Now we'll be upfront about this. I think this is a really grey area what Pubby does, and I still don't really know whether I agree with it, but it is definitely kind of avoiding the Amazon terms of services. So what Pubby does is you sign up for a monthly subscription, other people do the same, you can post your book on there, and then people can review your book and leave reviews, and in return you do the same for other people. But Pubby makes sure that two people never review each other's books. So the idea is that it's an independent service, you don't know who's reviewing your book, you can't incentivize them to give you a good review or anything like that, and the same goes for them giving you books. Now there was a cost to this service. I paid for 1 month subscription for this service, and it cost me $16.99, and so that allowed me to get reviews on up to 4 books, which was fine for the number of books that I created. And the final piece of marketing I did was actually on the sales page itself for the Amazon product. So a lot of people skimp and make their listing quite boring, but I want to see as much detail when I read the description for a product as possible. I also like to see, it's called A+ content, but if you scroll down the page on Amazon, you'll see big images sort of showing you contents of the book or a bit about the author. So I put quite a bit of time into making sure I had those big pictures on the Amazon listing pages as well. Again, I don't really know how much difference it makes, but it's something that I would want to see as the consumer. So that's what I did. And so that was really the marketing strategy in a nutshell. So I did 6 weeks of the advertising, and then I cut the advertising off to see what the results would be when the advertising was stopped. So it's time for the bit you've probably all been waiting for, and that's the results. So hopefully by now you've got an overview for how to make the books, how to search for good content for what the books might be. So it's time for my results. Now I've got my phone down here below me so that I can read the numbers off and actually tell you the right numbers. So I made 3 low content books and 1 medium content book. And I produced those books all within the space of a week, so they weren't, ridiculous hours going into producing any of those. And I am a fairly quick writer, so it made producing that kind of medium content book a lot quicker than it might be for some people, because I was writing about a topic that I know a reasonable amount about as well, so there wasn't too much research that had to go into it. Now, across the advertising, I spent a grand total of £733.83. So that was in just over 6 weeks worth of advertising. And I only applied the advertising to 3 of the 4 books because I wanted to see how one of the books would do without advertising. And that was actually the medium content book. Now, as I said, I was struggling to get the costs down, particularly on the US markets, my cost per click. So I actually only had £308.25 of sales. So a fairly big loss from the advertising. Although I would say I got my UK adverts down to approximately the break-even point by the end of my advertising period, but I never got anywhere near that with the US advertising. I then cut off the advertising for April and left April completely, so there was 0 advertising spend in April, and the books continued to sell, but not particularly well. So the book sold £13.03 in April, which meant I had an overall loss of £412.55, and that doesn't include the $16.99 that I paid for Pubby for 1 month. Now, you can see that's not particularly encouraging results. If the books continue to sell at the same rate that they sold in April, which I'm hoping they'll continue to trickle along slowly, it's going to take 2 to 3 years to recover the cost from those books. So what are the key takeaways that I learned in losing £400 on this business model? Well, the first is that I think that the advertising really does actually help. So the book that I didn't advertise for has sold precisely 0 copies. So it's in the other 3 books that the sales have all come, and those were the 3 books that I initially advertised. And I think that's just because I have shown to Amazon who would buy those books, what search terms they're searching for to actually purchase those books. Whereas the other books had 0 sales because Amazon has no idea necessarily what that book is about or who might want to buy that book. Now, it could also be that that book was just rubbish. So I don't really know, but that's the closest I could get to doing some kind of proper test there where I advertise or didn't advertise. So take from that what you will. But I would say that even though I lost a decent chunk of money in this business model, I think it does have some good potential. I think it's a business model that's potentially very scalable as well, especially because you can advertise for the products. So you can effectively, if you could get your advertising dialed in a lot better than I could, as someone who's not an expert with ads at all, you don't have to make that much money per book. But if each advert maybe made 10 to 50 pence per book, you can just keep scaling that up for a significant amount of money just because there are so many people out there looking to buy products on Amazon. I think the proof of this as well is in the pudding. So you can go on some of my favourite websites to look at for digital businesses. So for example, I went on one known as Empire Flippers, and I found very quickly a business on there selling romance fictional books on Amazon. There was 24 books, and this business was selling for around $400,000. Now that business makes around $10,000 profit per month from those 24 books. So you can see that if you can actually get some really good content books out there, you can actually sell very, very well. And potentially you wouldn't have even had to write those books yourself. Maybe you'd written one or two to get the ball rolling at the start. But once the money starts coming in, you could hire ghostwriters to write the books for you, and it could be a pretty hands-off business. Now, some of you may be looking at that going, $10,000 in profit a month for $400,000 to buy the business. That seems a bit sort of scammy because that's quite a lot of money to come in. That's about a 30% return on your capital if you were to buy that business per year. But to be honest, that's pretty standard. When I was buying and selling websites and building websites, it's pretty much the same numbers that I would see there. Between about a 30 and a 40x monthly multiple is generally what you can sell a business for. So, that could be a really attractive way to build a portfolio of businesses if you wanted, because most of these businesses will be fairly hands-off. Like having 24 romance books already there, already written, that's really the hard bit done. And I'm sure the owner for that business would be able to do a handover for you and show you how they run their ad networks, how they deal with any ghostwriters they might have, etc. So you could get a fairly passive business there where you might only need to spend 5 hours a week maybe and get a really decent income. Obviously, you've got to have $400,000 to start with, but you could do something on a much smaller scale than that. I'm sure there are loads of people looking to sell smaller accounts that might make £1,000 in profit a month who are looking to sell it for maybe £30,000 or £40,000. So I do see the potential for this business model. Now, it's not actually one that I'm going to be continuing with just because I don't think writing is particularly my forte, so I'm going to struggle to build up that library of fiction books or non-fiction books that I might want to write, and I don't have the money to throw at it to start the business rolling, because I think you really have to have either some money or a lot of time up front to get this business rolling. Now, I do have a couple of other businesses that I've tried that I'll link to in a playlist down below, and I'll put on the end screen as well, where I needed much less in terms of upfront capital to start making some money, particularly on the website business, and that was the most profitable side hustle that I've tried so far. I hope this video was really useful, and if it's the kind of content that you like, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and more people who might enjoy this will then hopefully get to see it. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.